Okay, good morning, everybody. Today's meeting is being filmed for live and subsequent broadcast by way of the Council's internet site. The images and sound recording may also be used for training purposes within the Council. As you will see from the agenda papers, generally the public seating areas are not filmed. However, by entering the meeting room and using the public seating area, you are consenting to being filmed and to the possible use of those images and sound recordings for webcasting and or training purposes. Would members please use their microphones to contribute to the meeting, and please remember to switch off the microphone when you have finished. Members dialing in remotely, please only turn on your camera when you wish to speak, and please remember to switch it off when you have finished. Also, could you ensure that you refrain from using any mobile devices during the committee and that any devices are on silent? Thank you. Okay. Do we have any apologies for absence? None? Okay. Any declarations of interest?
Excuse me, Chair. Could you put Councillor Paul Bright's... oh, sorry.
He's not on this committee.
Wrong meeting.
Okay. So we'll move now to the minutes of the meeting held on the 30th of March 2022, which is on pages 3 to 10. Obviously, I wasn't at that meeting. I wasn't the chair at that time. So Councillor Hourihine and Councillor Watkins, I believe that you were both here.
Move the minutes, Chair.
Move the minutes. Would Councillor Watkins be happy to second that?
Yes, happy to second that.
Thank you. I'll move on from that. And the next then is the Forward Work Programme, which is found on pages 11 to 16. Are you presenting, Mr. Price, on this? Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I mean, normally we would take the work programme as the last item on the agenda, but we thought, given that this is the first meeting of the new Democratic Services Committee, it would be worthwhile having this as the first item on the agenda, because it gives the new members an explanation of the work that this committee does and the terms of reference. So the first part of this report is just for information purposes, in terms of the makeup, the composition and the terms of reference of Democratic Services Committee. Now, as we say, the Local Government Wales measure of 2011 imposed a statutory requirement for all councils to set up a Democratic Services Committee. And the purpose of that committee was to have oversight of the arrangements for member support in terms of how you discharge your role as elected representatives. As part of that role, you have to formally designate a head of Democratic Services. Now, Leanne Rowlands, who's the Democratic and Election Services Manager, is the designated head of Democratic Services, and she will report to you annually in terms of the resources that she has within her governance team to support you as elected members in discharging this role. And the committee also has a duty to report annually to full council to say that you're satisfied as a committee that we have adequate resources to support you effectively in your corporate governance roles and your roles as elected members. The Council in Newport extended the terms of reference of Democratic Services Committee more widely. So apart from those statutory terms of reference, you also have a role in terms of oversight of the Council's written constitution and all of our corporate governance arrangements, and also a role in terms of monitoring and overseeing member training and development generally, as part of that support that we provide you to enable you to discharge your roles effectively. So that's the function of this committee for the benefit of the new members. It's a politically balanced committee. The membership is proportionate to the groups on the full council, and it has to be chaired in accordance with the measure by the leader of the largest opposition party. Hence, Councillor Fairweather is the chair of this meeting. However, as you will have seen from previous annual reports, this committee sits on a non-partisan way to look cross-party at issues affecting the Council generally. It's not generally a political meeting, and we look for consensus in terms of any recommendations that you make to full Council. It's not a decision-making committee. You don't have any powers to take decisions, but you can make recommendations to full Council in terms of the Constitution and recommended changes or improvements to the Council's corporate governance structure. So that's just setting the scene, if you like, in terms of the work of this committee. Before we go into the work programme, I don't know if any of the new members have any questions, Chair, about the terms of reference?
Yeah, Councillor Spencer.
I see we got set meeting dates. Is there any likelihood for other meetings to be put in?
As a legal requirement, you have to meet 4 times a year, and that's what we've got in the forward work programme. But yes, you can have as many meetings as you wish in terms of your forward work programme. We'll come to that later in terms of things that you have to do at certain times of the year. But if more frequent work comes up that needs a more urgent meeting, then we can slot those in later. One of the things that you will need to discuss and review as a new committee later on is not just the frequency of these meetings, but the timing. There's a legal obligation under the measure for all committees to review the timing of these meetings, just to make sure that they are convenient for the majority of members. I mean, hopefully, with the new hybrid technology and multi-location meetings, it's less of an issue. But I know in the past it has been difficult, to say, for working members to come in for 10 o'clock in the morning. So I think at the end of this item, you will need to discuss and agree amongst yourselves not just the frequency of the meetings, but the timings as well. Thank you, Chair. If there are no other questions on the terms of reference...
Just for accuracy, the 21st of July meeting has been moved to September now, hasn't it?
That's correct, yes. It was felt that the July meeting was too soon after this meeting in terms of the spacing, so the next meeting will now be in September. Okay, if there are no further questions on the terms of reference, the rest of the report then deals with the forward work programme in terms of what's on the agenda for the next 12 months. From the previous annual report that this committee submitted to Council, there were a number of ongoing matters that were rolled forward, if you like, into this current year, particularly in terms of the review of the written constitution, the changes required by the Local Government and Elections Wales Act, and the response to the COVID recovery aims and objectives, and whether there's any implication there in terms of the Council's governance structures. In addition to that, I've highlighted in the report that we took a number of reports to the Council's AGM in May, which were a requirement of the new legislation. So there were a number of new policies and procedures that were adopted at the AGM in May, just to reflect the requirements of the 2021 Act. And those include the new procedures for these hybrid and multi-location meetings, a new public engagement and participation strategy that this committee previously looked at before recommending that to full Council. As part of that, a new scheme for dealing with public petitions, and also then the competency framework for elected members in terms of not just induction training, but forward development training for members more generally. So those are things that Democratic Services Committee will need to keep under review and monitor as part of the forward work programme. So really it's a matter for the committee to decide as and when you think it's appropriate to receive reports on these particular issues as we're going forward. With things like the hybrid meetings and possibly even the petition scheme, it's probably a bit early in the day yet to be reviewing those, because they're new policies and we can't yet monitor how effective they are in practice. So maybe those are things that you could put on later on the agenda. The public participation and engagement strategy that Leanne presented to the previous committee has got a number of actions and objectives set out in that. So I think that is something that you could bring forward for review if you were minded to do so. In terms of the next meeting, which, as we've said, is now in September, there are a couple of things that we know you'll have to consider already at that meeting. One is one of the things that we didn't report to the AGM, and that's the legal requirement in the legislation to produce a guide to the Constitution and the Council's decision-making. We have one at the moment, but it's little more than an index in terms of where you can find things. So we're going to try and sort of make that a bit more easy to understand, if you like, in terms of explaining how the procedures work. So the intention is to bring something forward to you at the next meeting on that. The other item for discussion at the next meeting is something that we've been asked to review, again in the light of the public participation and engagement strategy, which is the arrangements for ward meetings. Now again, for the benefit of new members, these ward meetings have had something of a checkered history over the past of 10, 15 years. Originally they were held in every ward regularly, 3 times a year. But more recently, it's been left to the discretion of individual ward councillors whether they hold these meetings. And it divides opinion. You either love them or you hate them. Like I said, in some wards, they are very well attended by members of the public. In other wards, I've attended ward meetings where no one has turned up. So those wards tend not to hold those public meetings. So it's left very much to the discretion of individual ward members as to how and when these meetings are held. But I think the feeling is that even if that's not going to change, we need to review how they're supported and how these meetings are structured in future. So I think the intention is to bring a report to you next time with suggestions as to how we could take those arrangements forward. So that's what's in the forward work programme at the moment. We've populated it with some of the things that we know you have to do on a regular basis, such as the annual report to Council and the scheme of allowances. So those are already in there. But like I said, it's up to committee then to decide how and when you want to bring forward all these other work items. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr Price. Does any member have any questions or comments they'd like to make? No, that's fine. Do we want to confirm the September date now so that members know when it is? Okay, 12th of September, 10 a.m. If everybody fine with that? Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
So, thank you.
Before you move on, Chair, I'm assuming in terms of the timing of the meeting that the 10 o'clock is convenient for everyone. Like I said, there is a legal requirement for you to consider the timing of these meetings after the elections when there's a new committee. So I'm assuming 10 o'clock is okay for everyone?
I don't have any particular issue. Whatever time you want, we'll meet. It's not a problem.
I don't have any issues.
No, fine with me as well.
Shall we keep them all at 10 a.m?
Yeah, good for
or would
me.
you like to do a 10 a.m. one and then a 5 p.m. another?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't mind.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah, I'll go with.
Yeah.
10, yeah? 10 a.m. for all of them. That's great. Thank you. Thank you all. Move on now to the revised scheme of delegation to officers. And who is presenting this report?
That's me again, I'm afraid.
Okay.
Yes, I apologise that this report is coming back to you so soon after the last one, because we took a report to the AGM in May on the new officer scheme of delegation, and we thought that would suffice. But since then, we've come up with 1 or 2 issues in terms of how the current scheme is operating, and this report looks to address those concerns and those issues. The report that we took to Council didn't make any substantive changes to the officer scheme of delegation. All it did was change the scheme to reflect the new senior management restructure and the realignment of services. So they were the same delegated powers, they were just allocated to different heads of service who are now responsible for different service areas. Since we did that exercise, 1 or 2 minor anomalies have come out where there are some delegated decisions that should have been transferred to a different head of service, and we've picked those up in the report. For example, city centre management has now moved from city services to regeneration and economic development. So those powers need to move across to the new head of service, and we hadn't picked that up at the report that was taken to the AGM. There are some other minor issues then about service of antisocial behaviour and littering notices that should now sit with the head of environment and public protection. So we've taken this opportunity just to tidy up that scheme of delegation. But when we were looking at that review and those amendments, we picked up one or two substantive changes that have been overlooked at the report that went to Council in May. The first was in relation to the powers of the Chief Executive as the returning officer for elections. There's a different part of the Constitution which refers to allocation of functions and responsibilities, and it's clearly set out there what the Chief Executive is authorised to do on behalf of the Council as the returning officer, including, for example, declaring casual vacancies, declaring by-elections, and also appointing temporary members of community councils. This issue actually came up because following the last elections, Llanfacus Community Council was actually in quorate, and at one stage we were even looking to exercise powers to appoint some new temporary members just so they could co-opt and appoint new members. And it occurred to us then that although that power had been delegated to the Chief Executive in the functions and responsibility part of the Constitution, it wasn't actually reflected in her scheme of delegation in this part of the Constitution. So what we've done is updated that to include those returning officer powers, if you like, just for the sake of clarity. But it doesn't actually change anything. It just updates the scheme of delegation to reflect what is already delegated elsewhere in the Constitution. However, the one substantive change that we've been asked to put before you and ask you to recommend to Council to make this change is in relation to this scheme of delegation for planning decisions. Now, under the previous scheme of delegation, all planning applications in relation to council assets and property had to go to full planning committee. And the reason for that was that the former head of Regen Investment and Housing was conflicted because she was not just the corporate property manager, but she was also in charge of development control. So for the sake of openness and transparency, it was felt inappropriate for an officer to be wearing one hat determining a planning application that was being submitted under her other hat in terms of the asset management side. So that was the reason why that was included in the previous scheme of delegation. But what it did mean was that Planning Committee ended up dealing with some very, very minor planning applications in relation to council-owned property and assets that would normally have been rubber-stamped by the officers under delegated powers. Now, the change in the senior management structure and the move of the corporate property function to another head of service now gives us the opportunity to actually give the planning officers delegated powers to deal with minor applications in relation to council assets and property. The client role, if you like, for corporate assets and property is now transferred to the head of people policy and transformation. So she is now responsible for the submission of any planning applications in relation to those particular assets. The head of regeneration and development has the development control function and will determine those applications. So there's that separation of functions within the council and therefore less requirement for that openness and transparency in terms of these matters being referred to planning committee. So what we're recommending to you is that effectively council planning applications in relation to property and assets are dealt with in the same way as any other planning application. If they're of a minor nature that would normally be dealt with at officer level, they would be dealt with under the scheme of delegation, but under the other planning powers, if they were relating to more significant planning applications, they would still go to full council. So in other words, we treat them in exactly the same way as any other planning application. Yeah.
Sorry for interrupting. I just wondered if I needed to declare an interest in this as chair of planning.
No, it's not a personal interest. It will affect your role, obviously, and you will have a view, but it's not a personal interest. Okay? So that's what we're recommending, Chair, that this committee considers that change to the planning scheme of delegation and recommends to Council that it does change. Like I said, all the other scheme of planning delegation doesn't change. If it's a major application, it will still go to planning committee anyway. And there is still the call-in process, or there's still the ability for individual members to actually request that an officer delegated decision is referred up to planning committee anyway, provided there are valid planning reasons for doing so. So there are still those checks and balances within the system where members can refer prospective decisions up to planning committee, even in relation to council assets and property. So nothing else changes. It just puts the council applications on the same footing as any other external planning applications. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Could I just ask you one question, Mr. Price? In the past, when an elected member has put forward a planning application on their own home, it has gone before the planning committee. Would that still be the case, or can that be now dealt with by an officer?
No, that's correct. Nothing changes in terms of member applications. And similarly with any internal application where the officer submitting the application has a close association with the planning department. So again, for the sake of transparency and avoiding any perception of bias or undue influence, those applications would still go to planning committee. So any application submitted by or on behalf of an elected councillor would still go to planning committee, regardless of whether that was a minor application or a significant application.
So thank you for that clarification. Are there any questions or comments from committee members? Councillor Thomas?
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to mention I'm having quite a lot of problems hearing what's going on. I'm finding some distortion from yourself when you speak. It's the volume which you're coming over across, as David is, a bit variable. It's also fading in and out. And there seems to be echoes when Gareth speaks. There's sort of an echo to it. So it's actually quite difficult to hear the detail of this. What I will do is, I read the notes before we started. It seems to be a very comprehensive explanation, and I'll have to go through it again. I don't know whether there's anything we can do to improve the sound quality, or it might be a situation where people need to be aware of their microphones and perhaps speak a little closer to them. Thank you. Let's try it like that. Thank you.
Right. Any of the other members who are dialing in remotely, do they have any problems in hearing?
Just a little occasional fade in and out, none of the other bits for me.
Okay.
I've turned up the volume at my end.
Yeah, the same for me. It just fades in and out, but it's okay. It's bearable.
Okay, well, obviously some of you may have problems, but the minutes will reflect what's in the report anyway. But if you do have any further questions when you see the minutes you'd like to put forward, I'm sure Mr. Price would be more than happy to answer those for you or clarify anything for you. Are there any other questions or comments? Okay, so we've agreed the date of the next meeting, which is Monday the 12th of September at 10 a.m. And that concludes the meeting. Thank you all very much for attending.
Thank you.